What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are doing a new series called Free Game Friday. And the goal of this series is to just give you some free game outside of the normal content that I drop about best practices across the AWS ecosystem. So, with that being said, we're going to jump right in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the channel. Alright, so today we are talking about IAM. And IAM, for those who don't know, is Identity Access Management in AWS. So what this is, it allows you to pretty much lock down and manage who can get to what resources in your AWS account. So this is pretty much the gateway to any of the services that you might want to provision in AWS. They all start with granting access to your user accounts via IAM. And these are not user accounts that are specific to a particular application that you may be building, but these IAM accounts are more of, you have developers that need to be able to access certain resources, or you have service accounts that need to be able to access certain resources like compute and storage, things of that nature. So IAM just kind of focuses all around that. So our first tip for today is basically, what is IAM? We kind of covered that already, but AWS Identity and Access Management is a web service that helps you securely control access to AWS resources, which you already mentioned. With IAM, you can centrally manage permissions that control which AWS resources users can access. You can use IAM to control who is authenticated and authorized to use particular resources. All right. So here are the tips that we're going to cover for this session. The first one is lock down the root user account. The second one is follow the principle of least privilege. The third one is use IAM appropriately. The fourth one, use IAM roles when possible, and we'll cover that a little bit more. And then the final one is review and remove unused users, roles, and credentials. Okay, so let's dive into the first session here, or the first topic. So lock down the root user account. So this pretty much should be a no-brainer at this point if you've spent any amount of time in AWS. But if you haven't, this is pretty much step one. So the root user is pretty much the God level user in your specific AWS account. So they have complete control over your account, and they can, if this account gets compromised, your whole AWS ecosystem is compromised at that point. So this is very important. The second thing is don't share root user credentials. So typically, after you create your AWS account and it's going to create that root user with that account, you typically want to make sure you enable MFA on that account, and pretty much you throw away the key at that point. Metaphorically speaking, you just don't want anyone to use this account to do anything. So typically what I've seen organizations do when they set up a new AWS account and the root user account is created, obviously, so they'll go in and assign a new account or a new group administrator level access, and then all of the work is done in the administrator accounts, not the actual root account itself. So just keep that in mind as you're going through AWS. Keep your root user account locked down as much as possible. I think not sure if I covered this one yet, but the third tip was delete the root user access keys. So there's no reason for you to assign access keys or secrets to the root user account. That's just a recipe for a disaster that you're brewing. So do yourself a favor and don't do that. And then the final one, I think I already mentioned this, was enable MFA on your root account. And if you don't know what MFA is multi-factor authentication, which we can cover that more on another session. Okay. The second tip that we have was follow the principle of least privilege. And it says least privilege is a standard security principle. Grant only the necessary permissions to do a particular job. So this basically says grant permission or access to a resource only on a need to know or as needed basis. So you could kind of think of this as if, let's say if you work at a software company and you have several developers on staff, the developers would probably need to be able to go in and provision resources as needed. So that could be S3, Lambda functions, EC2 instances, VPCs, anything like that. So that makes sense for a developer to have access to that. What does not make sense if just a general developer on your company or at your organization, they probably should not have access to billing. So obviously they can go in and see billing, but they may not need to see what one particular department is spending on S3 versus another. I'm just using that as an example, but really only give users the amount of privilege or permission they need to perform their job function. And then this is one here. The second tip, start with the minimum set of permissions in a policy and then grant additional permissions as necessary. So during my research, I've noticed that AWS, they have several built-in roles and policies, and then you can just kind of extend them as you need. So I ran across a instance recently where we had some contractors who were coming on to evaluate one of our projects, and I just gave them the read-only access. So that gives them the ability to go in and kind of poke around and look at the services and just look at, see the infrastructure, but they didn't have the ability to make any changes yet. So I know there's a read-only user that's built in, a read-only role that's built in. There's also a power user role and an administrator role. So just be careful with who you assign to what. Okay, the next tip here is use IAM appropriately, and this is what do we have here? IAM is used to secure access to AWS account and resources. It is not used for authentication and authorization for websites with sign-in. So this is just basically telling you to use the right tool for the job. And that being said, a lot of people new to AWS would think that IAM would be the go-to for authentication and authorization within your application, but that's a big no-no. So we want to shift that that unit of work to another service that AWS manages, which is AWS Cognito. And this would be similar to if you're on premise, like a Active Directory Basically, it's an identity provider that AWS has, and this is where you will actually, if you were building out an app, and you would need permissions and roles and things of that nature. You would want to use that particular service cognito to perform those operations versus using IAM. All right. The next tip we have, and this just kind of makes sense, is use IAM roles when possible. Maintaining roles is more efficient than maintaining users, and when you assume a role, a dynamically provides temporary credentials. So this is just saying, if you know you're going to be building out any type of user base, or as your organization needs to grow, it's going to be easier for you to manage roles and policies assigned to that role versus trying to manage everything at a user level. So with that being said, if I had I think the example I used before was, I have a group of developers. I can create a company name dev role and then assign all of the necessary permissions to that particular role. And then let's say if somebody comes in from accounting or I don't know, accounting or some other business unit in the organization, we would want to assign them a different role because they may just need to be able to run reports or pull a report from an S3 bucket versus your developer role, who's going to have a lot more access to your AWS resources. So just keep that in mind. And I believe this was the final tip for today. And it just says remove, review unused users, roles, and credentials. So IAM provides last access information to help you identify irrelevant credentials that you no longer need so that you can remove them. Helps to reduce the number of resources you need to manage and monitor. So just like anything else, you want to go in and do your due diligence and clean up any unused roles or users, and especially if you may work in an organization that has high turnover. So there could be a point, and this is how a lot of data breaches happen or occur, is let's say someone was terminated from your organization, and they still had a user out there, and that user still had a secret access key and secret. So if that was not removed or deactivated, that user can pretty much still go in and access the same resources in AWS that they could when they were actually working in the organization. So you would want to think that people don't do nefarious things along the way, but as we know, that's just not true. So just do your due diligence, and if you see something that's not being used, or you say, hey, Jim no longer works here, or he works in another department now and they have their own AWS account, just go ahead and get rid of it. And one thing that I've learned from working in I'll say IT and software industry, if people are actually using your product and it's not working, they will definitely let you know. You won't have to question that at all. So we usually say no news is good news, but in this particular instance, no news could be bad news, because people could still be accessing your resources just because you left their access key deactivated. So at any rate, that's it for today's Free Game Friday. So what did we cover again? We covered basically lock down the root user account, follow the principle of least privilege, use IAM appropriately, use IAM roles whenever possible, and finally review and remove unused users, roles, and credentials. So I hope this video has been beneficial to you. If so, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.